Well, I really think it starts with education to prevent racism. Racism is one of those things that I think is a learned behavior, and so it starts with education of both students and adults. But I think from our perspective, looking at the youth and dealing with education is probably the best way to look at preventing racism. Looking at the difference between intent and reality is really a challenging question, but I think there's a clear difference. When the person has an intent, both good and bad, it has to be looked upon differently than just dealing with the reality. So the intent of being mean to another person can be very vindictive compared to if there's planned racism and it's just they're being mean in all situations. Same way, if a person has intent to be very good, they're just ignorant to the situation. They don't really know all the background and all the past. Then we have to, if they're willing to learn from that, their conversations and their behavior, then we need to work with it. But the reality, sometimes dealing with reality, is that's what people deal with on a day-to-day basis. How people are dealing with different situations and how they respond to them. So really, reality becomes an understanding of how people's lives are much different than maybe our own. Well, we take that role as a member of the elected official for the City of Mormon very serious. And how do we look at to prevent racism? It starts with looking at our major events and our city events that we're involved with. Something like Canada Day, we make sure it's a celebration of all religions, all cultures that make up Canada. And we also very seriously look at the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, especially number 57, where it really is telling us to make sure our employees are aware of the history and the past of residential schools and other people's history, to understand and be aware when making comments or having a misunderstanding. We really want people to be fair to all people up front and really judge them on their own behaviors instead of as from a cultural one-off statement.
Racism to me would be hating someone that is a different skin tone than you, or being prejudiced towards all different people of color than you are. This can be with rude remarks or general hate speech against all other people of color. Back in the old days, we were very derogative towards people of color as a society. In my opinion, I think that racism will go away, but with the progression that we're going at, it would be a very slow process. In order to make racism go away completely, we would need to make people more aware of the problem of it. This could be by showing people the problem of racism in school, to make them more aware and to make them want to make a change outside of school. With this, I think that we can make racism go away completely.
Well, the fact of people being racist, long time ago, people were segregated, there was slavery, and it's just passed down generation to generation depending on where you grow up. And that's the problem. We can't change events, but we can work towards a better future where we can teach people that there's no difference between people because of their race or skin color. I've not personally been target of racism, but when I was younger, I had a friend who was the target of racism and prejudice, as people would call him names, talk about his appearance, talk behind his back, and I felt very sorry for him, but there's nothing I could do about it, because I can't change people's mentalities and how they think about another person, even though they haven't got to know him. It's just very, very poor in my opinion.
I personally think it needs to be stopped. People think that it doesn't exist in Mormon or Saskatoon, but it does. I see it a lot, and I even have African American cousins that are affected by racism as well.